dan zu yi ju nam la shang ju ba lu da ni ya zu jin da gi chu nie ji pe zu nam ji ju la men ji dan ye ru ba ru.
어떤 것도 됐네. 어떤 것도 집에 죽어도 좀 라지지 올로 좀 쓰더라. 삼바장 온 것도 삼바지 비세 들어로 두세와. 삼바장 온 것들 지대 심마도 줄레지바도 지대 심마도 터된 바니. 지대 심마도 터된 전부터 레지가 너네 렌제지 렌제들라 렌제시 삼바 시다도 삼바 선의 조두샤주 송거너네 렌제시 삼바 차 안에 시다도 삼바 차지 다들이 선의 조두샤주 워드반도나 말베 선의 조두샤주
That's it.
선의 조두샤주 워드 다가두들레 라린 쳔베제 나오드바레 베이제는데도 자당 구주군이 모두 tinye바들도 송바선의 조도샤주스 그래서 이체 그래서 안가탱고도
So today we're again looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section that we're in is the section on training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity. That section we find three major categories. The actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, the measure of the attitude of a person of small capacity, and then dispelling misconceptions related to a person of small capacity. The first category, the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, has two categories. First, developing the state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then second, relying on a means or a method of achieving happiness in one's next life. That category, the reliance on a means or a method of achieving happiness in one's next life, has two categories, subcategories. Going for refuge in the three jewels, and then a second category of karma and its results. So we're currently dealing with karma and its results. So if we look at the outline, we find three categories related to karma and its results: reflecting on karma and its results in general, reflecting on karma and its results specifically or with the particulars, and then how one engages in virtue and turns away from non-virtue after having reflected on karma and its effects in general and in detail. So we've completed that first section, reflecting on karma and its effects in general, and we've gone through the second section of reflecting on karma and its effects in detail. So now we're moving on to this third category of how one engages in virtue and abandons non-virtue after having reflected on both of those karma and its effects in general and in detail. So in English, we find page 247 is where the outline begins. So
어디 송바 산에 조도 샤수들로 어디 라리지고 그 사제들 니래도 찌täm바다 네 저번도 도저히 장비 주스 저번 도저히 장비 주스 사제니도 사제 라리지고 사제 고론래
Lessa.
오늘 산에 조도 샤수들 사제니
Lessa.
찌täm바다 저번도 도저히 장비 주 내가 도저히 장비 주 사제니제 다산은 조도 샤수도 어때이마 산은 조도 샤 다다마들레 카빌렌데 나빌렌데 수가시 사브로 말바 카빌렌데 나빌렌데 수근걸로 어느 가서래 나빌렌데 주든지 다빈데 산다다 네 펜지길레 도지길레 산다다 네 네빌레다 망에빌레도 어떤 뭐 송사로다 송사보 나빌렌데 조도 샤수스나 다 나빌렌데 도비스 나빌렌데 뽕비스 먹이주모 먹어와주 당티 인제보다 제바 뽕비스 뽕비스제 되네 거와주 당 gawajun debata jebal jobi jodu sha jodos jobasana gawajul joba gawaju ne gawaju ta ne wote gawajul joba dlan jobaji gawaju nyale che adla joba sudrwa dobasana magicho debata jebal pombichu jodu sha tu wote yeah.
So this section, how you engage in virtue and turn away from non-virtue after having reflected on karma and its effects in general and in detail, has two categories. First, we find a general explanation, and then the second category of the four opponent powers, or in particular, the way of purification through the four opponent powers. So we've already gone over various topics. We've already gone over the results of the white karmas and the results of black karmas. We found various different kinds of results when it comes to fruitions. We have fruitional karma, we have causally concordant karma, and environmental karma. And then we found various explanations of the propelling karma and the completing karma. And then we've gone over other categories such as karma that is done or not done. So we've gone over many different subjects already. This particular section now deals with actually how one engages in that virtue, those virtuous activities. So those virtuous activities are referring to the 10 virtues, the ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtues. So when we're speaking of, there's two words here. There's engage and turn away. So we will now look at how we engage in those 10 virtues and then how we turn away from or abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities. So that's where we will begin. Please.
ne junjabata jebal dotugoro dubitsus judos wotemare ane jubitsu de tamaga jumon sujin kanto judu nyazuna lama tuna debal shanaji what someno jondu what jubitsu do what insarita.
So in this section we find the explanation of turning away from the 10 non-virtuous activities. So we find in the trainings or the teachings of this section, going for refuge to the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engaging in the ethics which abandons those 10 non-virtuous activities, and then if one engages in a negativity, acknowledging that downfall. So we find this section that deals with how one actually applies, in the second category, those four opponent powers to one's misdeeds.
Oje tatanama sane judu sajutla sajeni ji chitemba ta chabato tuji jambu sajeni ji ta tamu chitemba de chitemba de ta lani chibu kunu saji ro ta saji ji tanoma ta nya ji be utensen de saji no ji de na ta kale ngure ta ji
tambo
de kadu
tambo
de chitemba de nya ji be 사지 지리는 고알랑도와 사지 지리는 능아서 어때 사지에 돌고 와셔야지래.
So this particular section, Lama Tsongkhapa uses one general category, but when we look at Jayan Sheba's commentary on this text, we'll find there are 8 categories that he explains, and we'll go through those slowly.
다 지역은 담보도 어떤 자yan sheba 원된 담보들에 다 담보는 전문 전주레스 Magawale Dungenjo Telejatanga Tashes, Telejatanga Tashe, Nesen Tato Dakine, Denimaji Sembaris, Shedan, Gishun Tanji, Zawa Maba Tubison, Gishun Taji Zawa Mabason, Teyan, Zawa Tatune, Namin Rebu Gumbizo. Shesomba tar kana ki le dan debu ngeba sheba shene sheba zala manjuba yadan ya to gumba shade de shinto ko du chebe ngeba ne ka ishoros 다시 지금은 담부터는도다 지금은 담부터 장시베 어디 전화를 갈 때 무슨 다 간데 네 대지치에 되면도 대마지 든든에 밥이 되고 든든 군주 밥이 되고 든든한 밥이 되고 든든 고밥 밥이 되고 어디 다 동에 쉐바셔 군주 봉화샤 고방모도 나 공부하셨어 다 동에 대비 예미도 코알 그 주제도 산에 아버터나 안에 내주고 상바대 아버인 거로 내주고 상바 안에 라고 비타지 안에 동에 타이 타바 동에 때 타바 모든 여바데 어디 쉐베는 내주고 상바대 아버인 거로다 내주고 상바 지 취스 특가도 내주고 상바 지 취된고 하르스 다 동에 대바도 군주 대바들 사는 뭐부터 봐이나 안는 내주고 상바대 아버인 거예요. 포트카툴 로지비 추조데 자지보 어떻게 된고 하르스데
Then Giant Sheba Sachitamo Singare.
담부터
Mingare.
담부터 들다 담부터 예생군도 공비 로지 수사 예생군도 대지 공바인 소상 안 로지 수사는 가지고 상바고 로지 수 가지고 상바를 가지고 상비 로지 비추 대인 가지고 상바된 거래 당가서 로지가 있나 어떻게 담부터 가지고 상바된 거라서 가지고 상바고 로지 수대 된 거라서
Then the Nejong Sampa, the Jipu Chung, Nejong.
다 가지고 상바집에 중앙 가지고 용거를 링 가지고 집에 가지고 몸이 오르다
So the Giant Sheba's first section is where we find the quote from Ishanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds. And this section is basically day and night thinking of suffering and the origins of suffering in order to develop renunciation. So this is the Giant Sheba's first category. So it says, from non-virtue comes suffering. How can I truly be free of this? It is fitting that at all times, day and night, I think only of this. For the sage has said that conviction is the root of all virtues, and to constantly meditate on fruitional effects is the root of conviction. Thus, having understood virtuous and non-virtuous karma and their effects, do not leave it as at just an understanding, but meditate on it over and over, because this is a very obscure subject and it is difficult to acquire certainty about. And then there'll be a quote from the King of Concentration Sutra. So here, the explanation is that the Buddha's first turning of the wheel, he stated the four superior truths in various ways. He first stated that this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, this is the superior truth of path. And then Buddha stated that suffering is to be understood, origin is to be abandoned, cessation is to be achieved, and path is to be familiarized with or meditated upon. So here, when one analyzes the downfalls of cyclic existence by analyzing those first two noble truths, suffering and the origin of suffering, one then will, over a period of time, begin to develop renunciation. So one is able to first really focus on the various sufferings one has to endure according to that first noble truth, and then look to what the origin of those various sufferings are. And then this will motivate one to wish to definitely emerge or to be liberated, so that will allow one to achieve the state of renunciation. And then, as a result of that, one will want to be free. Therefore, it's necessary to engage in the steps to that freedom. So then one is motivated to meditate upon the pathway, which then leads to a liberation, which is a cessation of suffering completely. So this first section is dealing with the analysis of the Four Noble Truths, so that one will generate the desire to definitely emerge. And then I asked Rinpoche if this was specific to the small scope of this section, and he said, well, we have a small scope type of renunciation, we have a medium scope type of renunciation, and we have a great vehicle type of renunciation. Deep soon.
All Nari did go to Katuantus Chibaremdo, do they name it Sala Mambena, Tabatun Chimichi, Kunju Kuyu Mazana, Kuyu Zawa Chusimishi, Ceiling and Chushi Tambatan, Kwakang Shibachis, what does Katundus and Tabarism do? Doing them in the San Matana, Naju Samba Yumaris. Do they name it Sala Mambena, Tabatun Chimichis, Tabatun is an Naju Samba Jiba. 제심매지시 군중 구윤조리 마사나 구유자와 조심매시베스 군중라 때네 코그 주테 사마사나 안 구유자와 조주티시가 말이지 네 군중 구윤조리 마사나 군중 내발라 때네 동에 내바 집이 주테 야부 마시나 안 구유자와 조주티시가 말이지 So in
the Lama Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path, or the Lamrim Duden, we find a very similar point that's made, stating that if you do not think about suffering and the origins of suffering, it won't be possible to be free from that suffering. So in the Lamrim Duden it says, if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. If you do not consider the stages whereby true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious circle. Therefore you should cherish exuding total disgust and renunciation of such existence, while knowing which factors bind you to its wheel. The yogi, have practiced just that. If you would also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in this same way. So here, so it says, if you do not develop a keen interest, it says, if you do not think of the true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. This keen interest to work for liberation is referring to renunciation, a desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. So here, if one doesn't think about what the origins of suffering are after having analyzed suffering itself and wishing to be free from it, then it's not possible to get rid of what causes the actual truth of suffering, and that's the origin of suffering, the causes of that suffering. So it's necessary to engage in an analysis of those details in order to truly be able to be free from it. And that comes from a desire that one wishes to definitely emerge, which is it's called the desire to definitely emerge, or renunciation. These are all just this mean the same exact thing. We just use different terms for them. Different translators do.
Tele rebu dunga dunguris, dunga jungs. Ne dunga demi jutu kunju deba la tene, dunga deba jungu ware, dunga deba jungu wares. Tele jeta asa, ne kunju magawa le dunga deba jungu wa yususan, ne dunga de ne sentient sama kabuyo mare, dunga mendo bare, sama deba ndo bare, dunga mendo bare, dunga lta taji cheburis. Te Tele Jeta Ngatashi Tele Jeta Ngatashi is a large Dambatan, Godeni Tenza Marbete, Godenta Ladeni Sini Bagatendua, Magawa le Dongan Jebe, Dongeta Bakunu Debani Dembashi, Debashi Tendua.
In Lamden and Goden and Kabiore.
Tele Jeta Ngatashi, Chetar said, Cheta Zutat, Dongan Jutan Jebel Tires, the Tower Godero. Taji Landero, Landen Latin Tower.
Less so.
What
Vishaluka Tambo. So then when we go back to the engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds, or in Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, we find the Four Noble Truths presented right here in the first two lines. From non-virtue comes suffering. So here this is referring to that independence upon the origin of suffering, suffering arises. So the cause of suffering is the origin of suffering. So from non-virtue comes suffering is referring to the truth of suffering and the truth of origin of suffering. And then this second line, how can I truly be free of this, is referring to the cessation of suffering and the path. So here, in dependence upon a pathway, one is free of that suffering. So this is the third and fourth noble truths being presented here by Shantideva. From non-virtue comes suffering, suffering in the origin of suffering. How can I truly be free of this? Freedom from suffering, how? It's dependent upon a pathway, and then one achieves independence upon that pathway, a cessation. And all sentient beings wish to be free from suffering. All sentient beings don't want suffering. So if they, that freedom can be achieved through reliance upon the path. So how can I truly be free of this? So here, all sentient beings wish to be free from that. So that I is referring to this plight of all sentient beings at that point. So that I is pervasive to all of them, and that is that by relying on that path, one is free of the suffering he or she does not wish to endure. Deep-sun. So then it says, it is fitting that at all times, day and night, I think of only this. So if one day and nights thinks of only the suffering and the origin of suffering, then one will be able to develop a desire to definitely emerge and then be able to achieve the state of liberation itself. So if one thinks of the Four Noble Truths day and night, then the result of that will be that one will develop the realization of renunciation and then achieve a personal freedom or a liberation. So when we look at the renunciation in terms of the various capacities, we find a very coarse type of desire to definitely emerge that's presented in the pathways shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And then we find a more subtle explanation in the pathways that are shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So then we find that these are in common because one of the great vehicle practitioners first relies upon these subtle, coarse, and then more subtle forms of desire to emerge. The Jipu Chenmo, Jipu Chungo dan Tungo dan Jin dan Tungo dan Tungo Laji River Deji Rabal San Dangoro, Jibun Tumu Deji Chamule San Dangoro, Dino Tumu La, Chungo Tumu La, Chipa Lapson, Draban San Tumo. So this is why it is called in common. It's because the great capacity practitioner still relies upon those coarse forms of the desire to definitely emerge, as well as then those more subtle forms of the desire to definitely emerge. So this great vehicle practitioner relies on all of those scopes, wisdom, understanding, and that's why it's called in common. Dixon.
Gyushun Tanji Zawa de Meba Yimba Sanji Sumbaris, Zawa Meba, Goagi Zawa de Meba de Dios Meba, Goal Meba, Goal Gabiuna, and what Goa Yungrota, Meba and then Tubi Sons, Tuba, Shaja Tuba Sunwaris, Goa Tanji Zawa de Meba Yimba de Shaja Tuba Sunwaris, Goa Tanji Zawa Meba Dumia Taji Garjegusana, the Zawa Tatune. Namendrebu Kumbisos, Gawade, Nazolangina, Dewa Yungere, Melichegre, Talichegre, Taba Yungere, Sanji Gobon Yungeres, Dosan Tabaina, and the Gawal Meba Yungere, Gabi Yungeres. What is on the Zamarva?
For the sage has said that conviction is the root of all virtues, and to constantly meditate on fruitional effects is the root of this conviction. So if one has the conviction or a wish, a mupa, a desire to constantly engage in virtue, so it's not for the sage that conviction is the root of all virtues. Then the mupa, the gewat sawa.
Gishun Taji Zawa Maba in bed Tubak Shaja Tubu Sumbares.
Then the mupa, Yandra Surlan, Sena?
Gishun Taji Zawa Mabas and Gawal Maba, Gawal Gabo.
So conviction, yeah, so it's correct. So it's a conviction in virtue. So this conviction literally means that you like doing virtue. So you wish to do virtue. So the word conviction is a way to translate it, but within it, it's not just this certainty. There's also this liking for doing virtue. So this affinity for virtue. Sometimes mupa is affinity. So an affinity for virtue. So this, because with this affinity for virtue, and by constantly meditating on fruitional effects and so forth, one will be able to achieve the various fruitional results of the human rebirth, the rebirth as a god, the state of liberation, and then eventually complete Buddhahood. So this conviction in virtue eventually leads to those things. So one is meditating on those things that it leads to, those fruitional results, and then that actually aids and increases one's conviction or affinity. Diksun.
Shesum Bataras Kana Gale Dan Rebu Sheba Shene Sheba Tanla Majubara Yanta Yanto Gumbrashate the Shinto Kudu Jube Neba Chi Nega Isharosa and what the Karsagure Tak Kabi Lendetan Nabi Lendet Galo Sheba Tanjaju Marmajuba and the Kabi Lendet and Nabi Lendet Yana Yanto Tabat the San Tangwaris Yana Yanto San Gumbashates Jusen Karas and what the Shinto Kudu Jubese Kabi Lendet and Nabi Lendet what is Naming Dabi Debut Nabi Ledan Mangambi Ledan Penjig Ledan Duji what is Galo Shinto Kudu Chubar Ngodu Jetanga Dutu Mare Ngozun the Shetu Mares Ngodu Rebak Dutu Mare what the Shinto Kudu Chubares what the Nebania Shinto Kali Kabur what the Yana San Madonna what the Neshidi Umares Yana Sandana or the Swaji Smola then what the Nebania Ures Kanag Ledan Jebo Sheba Shene Sheba Zanla Manju Barar Yanta Yanto Gumbar Shate then the Shinto Kudu Chube Nebachi Neka Isharos what the Tambo what the Tabadre.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa goes on to say, thus having understood virtuous and non-virtuous karma and their effects, do not leave it at just an understanding, but meditate on it over and over, because this is a very obscure subject and it is difficult to acquire certainty about. So here this is stating that one should always, at all times, think about black actions and their results and white actions and their results. One should always do this over and over again. And the reason is that these facts that are presented about karma are extremely hidden phenomena. They are not phenomena that one can achieve through direct perception or through reliance upon a correct sign. It's necessary to rely upon the Buddha's word in order for one to obtain a certainty about it. So when we look at these various topics of the fruitional results and causally concordant results and environmental results and throwing karma and completing karma and karma that one has done, etc., we will find that these facts are extremely hidden, and therefore one has to think about them again and again and again and rely upon the Buddha's word in order to truly become a believer, to have belief in them. So Lama Tsongkhapa's suggestion here is to always think about black actions and their results because of the difficult or the subtlety of the points made, and the fact that they're extremely hidden phenomena, which is a category, and one can't arrive at it by using a sign, a correct sign, or a perfect reason, it's sometimes called, but there's no way to rely upon that.
And the magic less again the Merrill Harris. Loma Cabal Sabres, Mati Minkars, Lati Minkars, Tisuna what the Shiakamar, Shindu Kutu say what the Marvata, Shindu Kutu.
Jewangama, Cherangich?
Jewangama, leg paper is a good one.
Okay.
Less again Suris, me, Merrill Harry, Loma Cabal Sabres, what the Tisuna Shindu Kutu.
So if we look at the virtuous, this basis that we have as a human, we find that there was virtue projecting karma that created this. So who created this karma that allowed me to be a human? Was it a god? Was it a human? So these questions can't be answered easily because of the fact that they're extremely hidden phenomena. What time was it? What did they look like? Etc. All of these details are extremely hidden. So then perhaps when we wake up in the morning and you say, what time did you get up? You could say the time, but to say what second within that time did you get up, then this becomes an extremely hidden phenomenon. There are many different types of extremely hidden phenomena. So this is what is being pointed out, this very hidden phenomena, this very obscure subject is referring to extremely hidden phenomena. So we find in Aryadeva's 400 verses that Aryadeva states, if you're having trouble believing in the pronouncements Lord Buddha made about extremely hidden phenomena, rely upon other subjects which are presented, such as emptiness, where signs and reasoning can be used. So Aryadeva states that if you are having trouble with these hidden things, look at things that aren't as hidden so that your faith develops in that way. In Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika, the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, we find a similar point that's made about the Four Noble Truths, stating that you alone are the expressor of the Four Noble Truths, and therefore there is certainty with other points that you have made. So here, again, this is another quote to show that one can engage in the analysis of other points that Buddha made to then allow one to arrive at this state of inference, which is an inference through belief, it's called. When we look at inferential valid cognition in the categories, this is a translator's note, inference through belief is one of the categories of inferential valid cognition.
상지가 송코나를 되네 셰구레스 네 상지가 송코나 상지지 송코네게 상지가 송코나게 네 신도 고주도 세계를 마도 상지가 손으로 맞대봐 신도 고주 참는 세도고 말이스.
So
아, 대야 띵은지 잡을래서 니바 어떤 말이래. 띵은지 잡을래. 다와 가마 제바 내 동신 저당 중다 제비 사실라 나키 칸 나바 젠주장 최는에 된바이 치면송 세송바 따르 지진시비 송라 이체바실라 장데 데 주미지 내바 마니나 추강라야 저와지비 내바 메니토스 어디 사진이 봐도 어때 사진 송 코나라 때네 네 신도 구줄래 내도서 예치 내가를 마도 니에토 말해서 어디 니바 어디 tingzi jabul otomate tang dusita
tingzi jabul konaloso
tingzi jabul le
son kapa de la
tingzi niba o tingzi jabul tanan go zure
okay
teya tingzi jabul le sini sache niba go zure
okay
tingzi jabul le
so
dawa kama je satong shin dawa de kama ga salmalu
laso
redan zongda je ba sashi la sa
laso
redan zong ga sa 매바 차바 있나야 나기 칸 나바 현주장 사지 최는에 대바 있으면서 사지 송샤바들 좋아요 말이야 네 세송바 따라 디진시비 송라 이체바 셰라사 디진시비 렌데도 속은걸로 사지 송샤비 시들이 이체시 이체바를 셰라 짱데사 들라 네 사지 송샤비 신도 고주거리도 솔레 장제 ndala 주미지 내가 만년나 추강라야 저와지비 상지지비랑도 내가 내가 말했었다.
그래서
어디 사진이 받으래? 상지 송권나라 때는 마동에시니에 도 말해서 땡은 잡으시거든 말해.
So the next category in Jayan Sheba's commentary is that Buddha is the only one, or is alone in the explanation of the extremely hidden phenomena of white and black karmas. Here we find a quote from the sutra, from the King of Concentration Sutra, and it states, were the moon and the stars to fall from their place, and the earth with its mountains and cities to perish, or the realm of the sky to completely transform, you, Buddha, still would not speak a word of untruth. So here the point is that the Buddha has told the complete truth. The Buddha's doesn't change. It's not a changeable thing, because it's what the Buddha has stated is fact, is truth. So there's nothing, even if all of the moon and the stars fell out of the sky, and the mountains crumbled, and the sky changed into something else. There's nothing that could happen that would make the Buddha's word not correct. So this is the point that's being made here. Thus have conviction in the teachings of the Tathagata. So this conviction here, I think it says yichi in the Tibetan, so this is a belief. Gain this belief. Thus gain belief in the teachings, or conviction in the teachings of the Tathagata, and then sustain your meditation on them. If you do not have uncontrived certainty about this quality of truth in the Buddha's teachings, then you will not gain the certainty that will please the conqueror with regard to any of the teachings.
tambo tomba ji tene sanji ge shira ji bola so ba so ge tomba ji ten sha ba te tambo tomba ji ten tomba ji she so na an sanji ge tomba ji so ba ten ba yin ba ko na ge res tomba ji da ang da la ten ru to ro da mo du ji da ang da la ten tomba ji ru tomba ji she an shira ji tomba ji so ba ten ba yin ba ko so na tel la ten she du ko ju so ba so ga lo yi chen tu na ge res 상지 지송 꾸줄라 디 동바지 때데 네 되니 코나 이치 샤스 말베 되니 코나 이치 샤스 어트레메데 다무 동바지 때 응어두지 당한다라 때네 동바지 주 동바진 시에서나 셔러 예배 돈인 송바데 대바이 먹고노로 돈인 송바 대바이나 안 상제기 렌데 송바도 그걸로 대바이 먹데 이치네 돈으로 그래서 대인 코나 이치샤스.
So again, the Buddha alone, this section is gaining conviction that, or the belief that the Buddha alone has given this presentation. Without the Buddha, one will not be able to understand extremely hidden phenomena. Here, the emphasis is very similar that has been pointed out in Aryadeva's 400 verses. So it's talking about gaining this conviction and certainty about this quality of truth of the Buddha. So Aryadeva is very smart or intelligent in that he states that because the subjects that are extremely hidden phenomena, such as karma and its results, are very difficult to understand and believe, to rely upon subjects such as emptiness that can be understood by reliance upon a correct sign. And then after one comes to the conclusion that the emptiness that the Buddha has presented is absolutely correct, when one looks at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, one can see that the presentation of emptiness in that sutra is completely correct by studying, learning about emptiness, relying upon correct signs, and one can arrive at the understanding of emptiness through correct signs. So once one arrives at that understanding and belief in emptiness, then one can say this particular pronouncement is certainly true, therefore the other pronouncements must be true as well. So one arrives then at an inference through belief, and that belief or conviction is gained by looking at all of these other teachings and points. So Aryadeva's point, if you're having trouble believing in the very hidden pronouncements that Lord Buddha made, then rely upon such teachings as emptiness to help you gain this faith and conviction. So these are the points that Aryadeva made that are very similar to what Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about here.
Donen deba kunyu deba goden laden tuso sema rusa sona shesa sona ane deba jitan bi nden donen babi deba nden kunyu babi deba shesu ki sanji ki son kolo tambu tabu de ane deba jitan ba de son ba deba yimba de kosa sona tenne sanji ko de lende son lende la son bi kana lende la son de an ane deba res denji son ba deba yimba kan je son be res. So then
when one analyzes the Four Noble Truths and goes over them again and again, and then arrives at a valid cognition that's related to those, so using correct science to establish the truth of suffering, the truth of origin of suffering, the truth of cessation of suffering, the truth of path, then once one arrives at this belief because of analysis in these truths, then one can say these pronouncements made about the white and black karma and their result and its results are also true based on what I have come to the conclusion of related to topics that are not extremely hidden phenomena.
What did So this
is the second section.
Kaji tomba ni la ngeba nyeba kesene le dan debula ngeba meji dela masowa ne toni ju kwa shi ju lu sonwa te toni kona ne teni teni tone lende la ngeba nyeba nyebi tuzu ju shete do teni lesa tinga de jabi jerwata do teni le
Lesa
dawa chuburu hejo lu dawa 추나 당지 추 나와진 신의 지된 바른 로아이 세전 시를 제바 매매장 세전 시를 제바 매매장 레나 제바 매바 만주대 가나 지진 제보 해봐지 가나 지진 제보 해봐지 리비 수주 군데 장왕대 리비 수주 군데 장왕대 차신 통과 자유学运 차신 통과 자유 学运 写松说 我的 松巴的 松巴 东巴年了 俺巴年 비수 东巴年了 这不 차유 就是 东巴年了 这不 차유 就是 장지부터 메도 我的 东巴年了 这不 차유 就是个多
제보 차이
这不 차유 就是我的把카지 돈을 고아 차송나 레데 송고 말았어 레데 요 말았어 레데 송고 말았어 너 어떤 디오 말았어
오케이
돈을 고아 차송나 레데레 내가 시체를 연구했어 시체와 연구했어 네 시체와 연구했어 어디 돈이 고소나 내 레주들라서 도술래 내가 시체를 연구했어 레주들라서 도술 내가 시 많이나 돈이 도송슬라와 이노들 롱차노
So this section deals with the wrong understanding that those beings have who state that they have an understanding of emptiness, but not an understanding of karma and its results. Because once one has an understanding of emptiness, then that understanding of emptiness completely allows one to understand and enhance his or her realization of karma and its results. So this statement that it's possible to have had this experience of emptiness of some sort, but not believe in or really relate to or understand karma and its results. So it's saying that this is wrong. So it says, some who claim that they have acquired certain knowledge of emptiness are uncertain about karma and its effects and do not value it. This is a mistaken understanding of emptiness. For once you understand emptiness, you will see that it is the meaning of dependent arising, and it will assist you in becoming certain about karma and its results. So a much greater understanding of karma and its results would come if one had an understanding of emptiness, not the other way around. Like illusions bubble, and then the same sutra. So the King of Concentration Sutra states, like illusions, bubbles, mirages, and lightning, all phenomena are like the moon reflected in the water. It is not the case that living beings who die and go to their next lives are offspring of Manu, the first human being at the beginning of the eon. Yet the virtue that you possess does not disappear. The virtuous and non-virtuous give rise to their effects accordingly. This logical approach is sound, though subtle and difficult to see. It is within the scope of the conqueror.
너네 말해 당아 소소가 아이 사주 말해 아이들 포문가를 뜨는 줘 말해 포문가를 뜨는 줘 버래 요왕가를 뜨는 줘 버려 네 아이 사야돼 포문가를 맞대 봐 라와도 매버들 돈이 로도 말해 아 포문가를 맞대 봐 네 아이 사야돼 또비 따발을 맞대 봐 라와도 매버 또비 따발을 맞대 봐 라와도 매버 돈이 말해 라와도 말해 봐 돈이로 tubi tabala madhuba rawa mabata koyondu tubi tabala tuyne yobate yeji meji kon marveda pomangala madhuba rawa mabata kodu pomangala ten tubate yeji meji kon uruda toni tubulu tege tendil chujene gres tendil shibulu tege toni tubulu chujene koni toni tusuna tendil tubulu ta toni tubulu ni chidu chila chajugo gres toni tubulu tende tubulu troshe tende tubulu toni tubulu troshe ba chonsuna an toni mone tunu gres ne toni tubulu tege tende tubulu tele geshe ge tunu toni shedulu kono warte mone ko chago maraste what is on marba.
So when one begins to understand emptiness, has a realization of emptiness, there is the understanding that the I is merely designated on a collection, this collection coming together of 5 aggregates the 5 elements and so forth. There is no independent I or inherently existed I that is separate from that collection that is its basis of designation. So this understanding of dependent origination is what then allows one to then enhance his or her understanding of karma and its results. So once one has a direct realization of this dependent origination, then that mind that sees the emptiness and the dependent origination then also is enhanced at that point in regards to its understanding of karma and its effects, because you see the exact meaning of dependent origination, dependent arising, and therefore you would then understand the hidden phenomena, which is karma and its results, much better. So if someone says that they have this understanding of emptiness, and there's this missing piece of this understanding of dependent arising that then enhances the understanding of karma and its results, their understanding of emptiness is not real. It's wrong. Rinpoche, Chutsu Zhelan Kanchi. We'll take a short break.
Oh, yeah. What don't you choose? What the got to that somebody what there is a tunnel choose. That nobody goes on now what the lending about Takade, Tony Shebulu to get Tende Shebulu to cruising as you go. Tende Shebulu to get Tony Shebulu to cruising. Can you put to go?
So we find this very definite connection between dependent arising and the realization of emptiness. So the realization of emptiness is the realization of dependent arising. The realization of dependent arising is the realization of emptiness. So this third section deals with the appropriate arisal of emptiness and its relation to dependent origination, and how it would enhance one's understanding of karma and its effects.
Tende Shibulu to get Tony Shibulu to Trusheba, Tony Shibulu to get Tende Shibulu to Trusheba, what the Tendo Marba. Kanshi Tenju Maybe, Chunga Yuba Mayan, Tiji Tumba Maybe, Chunga Yuba Mayanos. What does the lady do?
The Denji Mayan, you
Tende Mayim Shuji, but you don't tend him chap.
know the Longari.
But Kanshi Tenju Maybe, Chunga Yuba Mayanos. Tende Mayim Shuji Yumares. Kanshi Tenju Mayimbi Chunga Yuba Mayin, Teacher. Kangala Tendi in Sultan Tendi, you said Teacher, Chuna never to be Tumaris. Tumba Mayimbi Chayumas, Chutanji never to be Tuma in the Chutanji Tendi in Beaches. What the head of woman.
So, and we find in Nagarjuna's root wisdom text where he states, since there is no phenomena that does not dependently originate, there is no phenomena that is truly established. So because of this, there is, if there is emptiness, there is dependent origination. And if there is dependent origination, there is emptiness. So we find no phenomena that we can say does not dependently originate. Therefore, all phenomena are not truly established. So this is the point that we find in the root wisdom text.
Tajil Michel Lanson Nassolo Timidon, Ha, then the Roa Mabada, Tomba Kelenti, Koani, Chesi Susu Nawa Tesito, Tatun Tobi Kumbatuba means Naji, Renju Mabachisha to Nashi, Yujin, Zetan Kunjina, Tessitayi Jebazubalas. Was in Ha, then the Roa Mabadas, Ha, then the Roa Tele Marba, Tomba Kelenti, Koanis, Tony to Lunibude. Tende ko kan lo ta tende toni ko kan lo ni bute na phasu to shi ga ko ris na tende lo ma ba ta to ba klente ko ani ji phe ji du ko ji ko ris te me ba ji su su cha ba ina toni ko yu du tende lo de phe ma du gen tende ko le toni do lo le phe ma du ba cha so na toni ko ya ba re ko ma ris
The Lamsam Namsam Lung Yanjer Surang.
Hawa tendi loa meba ta, nawa tendi loa meba, tendi shibilo te marbe, hawa tendi loa meba taas,
The Korwa.
Tumba kelenti kuwa nyi, tumba kelenti zondu, tendi yinzang deba drubi tumba rwa ta, deba drubi tumba shibilo te, teni nyi, pensu jili jili, zhu shigen kuwa res, zhu ma jiba ji ngewa cha zuna, tunil kuwa cha uwa ma res, hawa tendi loa meba ta, tumba kelenti kuwa nyi, chisi susu nawa tesi to, tatung tubi gumba tuni tuba ma res, tatung tubi gumba tuba means, naji renju meba chicha to, ngenshi yu jinsi tang kunji na, tesi tayi chiba zuba la, wate tuni tu nukares, tuni tu lu, tendi tu lul chushe, tendi tu lu, tuni tu lul chushe zuna, anu wate tuni mune tu koyong res, wate sundu ma re.
So the real understanding of emptiness arises from the mind that understands dependent origination. And in Lama Tsongkhapa's Three Principles of the Path, we find a quote that says, "Who sees the inexorable causality of all things, both of cyclic life and liberation, and destroys any sort of conviction of objectivity, thereby enters the path pleasing to the victors. Appearance as inevitably relative, and emptiness as free of all assertions. As long as these are understood apart, the victor's intent is not yet known. But when they are simultaneous without alternation, the mere sight of inevitable reality becomes sure knowledge, rid of objective habit patterns, and the investigation of authentic view is complete." So here, one sees the causality, sees the dependent origination of things, and then sees the emptiness of things because of this dependent origination that is present. We find that in Lama Tsongkhapa's Three Principal Paths.
Ani sanji ke dole kanji chenle chiba tema je, tela chi raji we mayis. Watu kan rabu mundu. Kanji chenle chiba, jujen la teni chiba de, demba marubo res. Demba marubo res. Kanji chenle chiba tema je, tela chi raji we mayis. Watu kan rabu mundu. Jujen la teni chiba, demba marubo chiba lo tage, jujen la teni chiba lo tage, ten cheba shebe lu daba to be chair member shebe lu to shegres daba to be chair member shebe lu tege jujin la tune cheba le to shegres
so we find in one of Buddha's quotes where we see the causes and conditions that give rise to things, we see the lack of true establishment of them. So it's very similar to what is being presented here by Lama Tsongkhapa, in that this dependent arisal allows the emptiness, and the emptiness, when one understands emptiness, one understands dependent arisal. So there's a relationship between emptiness and dependent origination, in that if you have this dependent origination, you have emptiness. If you have emptiness, you have dependent origination.
그래서 어떻게 가도록 돈을 제비차 주서 어떻게 가도록 뜻을 해야 되거든. 다 돈을 제비차 주가도록 어떻게 같이 동반이랑 야반이바 계산에 레단 제불랑 야바 매진 들라 맞어 네 돈이 주고 와신지로도 송대사 다 돈이 또 살다 안을 레를 맞어바지 어떤지 어때 돈이 또요 말고 돈을 구하시기로 손대레스 돈이 고난에 대니기 돈도 돈에 렌들라 내가 집에 조수주 싫어서 돈이 또요나 돈이 집으로 되게 렌들네 렌들 집으로들 조시해가지고 그래서 조수 주셔대서 조수주 가지고 그래서
So once
돈이 돌로 텐데 돌로 조시 텐데 돌로 돈이 돌로 조시구나 아니 돈이 문에 두고 그랬어 테마 테스와 마이나 돈이 문에 고고 말에 돈이 돈바진을 고하신도 송데레스 셋 유셰데사 안 어디 띵은 잡으로 롱드랑 말베
So when you have a mind that understands emptiness, you have a mind that understands dependent origination. And if you have these minds that understand emptiness and dependent origination, then you necessarily have something that assists you. So this mind that sees dependent origination is an assister to the person who is trying to understand karma and its results. Here the point being made is that the mind that sees dependent origination sees emptiness, and that mind that sees emptiness, realizes emptiness, sees dependent origination. This understanding assists one's understanding of karma and its results because of the understanding of dependent origination. And now we have a quote from the King of Concentration Sutra. So Rinpoche read this again. Some who claim they have acquired certain knowledge of emptiness are uncertain about karma and its effects and do not value it. This is a mistaken understanding of emptiness. For once you understand emptiness, you will see that it is the meaning of dependent arising, and it will assist you in becoming certain about karma and its effects. Then in Yuko Chu Chen. Okay.
And trouble the bubble marble, about penguins, damn you about the demo marrow. What do you do with talk put in the Juma, trouble, Pinjo, Tasha Manko, Shamanko, saying, you know what they redas or the children of the Chunu. Or the Naji, Chuna, the Bottle of your mother, the Bottle of Town Trudu waters, Pinju Dabores, Juma Dabores. And what the tribune of this, what the Pujati said.
Less so.
Sentient Shilijiba, Mimi John, Sentient Shilijiba, Mimi John, Lena Sheba, Mabam with the Sentient Shilijiba. Sentient Shilijiba, never to be joy, you must. Sentient to the Kalo, Shilijiba, Mimi Johns, never to be joy. Mimi John, Lena Sheba, Mabam with the Demo Maduba in a lady member of Lady Yoris. Demo Maduna, Demo Madu, she will look again, Lende, she will look true shakers. Lena Sheba, member Manjute Kana Chijin Debo, Kana Chijin Debo members, Kabi Leon Debo, the Wayungore, Nabi Leon Debo, the Dungayungores, Pimpashi, Zibi Suji Kunde. Ribi Suju Tetabi Tanga la Tene, the Zan Tamba in the Zambres, Gund Zama de Trashin Tunga Jayu Shuis, Trashin Tomakawa, and the Swanji Shu, the Swanji Shu, Jayu Shu, Swanji Kuningosung Shu instead of Madwa.
Rinpoche, repeat Sugi. Did Donagare?
Ah, Ribi Suji. Gunde Zanwates, Ribi Suju Gunde Zanwate, and Chuna Chu, the Mamaru, Tendi in Bejer, Puna, Jumajin, Chubujin, Roji, Ta, the Guru, Tetabi, Tanga, Riba Juro, Ribi, Tetabi, Ribi Sudel, San Tanga, the Zambres, Ribi Suju Gunde, Tetabi Tuni Ribi Tanga, then San Tanga, Zambres, Zambo.
Zambo, get Yabo. Then Dashing, Da sound.
Trashin Tungawa, Trashin is
Trouble. Ale, trouble.
Tombakawa, Swanji Kuningosun is a digmara. Swanji Kunangosun Tugamadu, Jeda Shedu Maris. Trashin Tunga, Jayu is, Sheson Zos, what they get, Tony and Rebicha to 10 years.
Drippy.
다 뭐한테 돈이 주고 딱 붙는 놈도
Less.
그는 나주제 대부 마두데 땡데 이베시 보나 주마지 초부르지 해주지 루루지 뭐도 보자도 말도
Less.
요새 대부분 보나 소지지에서 잡고도 빼나서 되는
So then the king of concentration sutra then points out, read it first. The same sutra says, like illusions, bubbles, mirages, and lightning, all phenomena are like the moon reflected in the water. It is not the case that living beings who die and go to their next lives are offspring of Manu, yet the first human at the beginning of the eon, yet the karma that you possess does not disappear. The virtuous and non-virtuous give rise to their effects accordingly. This logical approach is sound, though subtle and difficult to see. It is within the scope of the conqueror. So if we look at subjects and we look at their emptiness, we'll find that we could state the subject, a sprout, is not truly established because it dependently originates. The subject, I, am not truly established because I dependently originate. The subject, an illusion, bubbles, mirages, lightning, all of these things are not truly established because they dependently originate. So here an illusion is something that's created to fool your eyes, and bubbles are the bubbles in the water. Mirage is something in the sand far away where, for instance, an example of a mirage is something you see in the sand far away that's not really there, and lightning and so forth. So these things are all not truly established. And it says it's not the case that living beings who die and go to their next lives are offspring of Manu. So here, sentient beings' birth is not... I really would like to take time with this quote right here and rework it, actually. But we don't have time at this very moment, but I'm going to give you the meaning of the lines. So here, this part, it is not the case that living beings who die and go to their next lives are offspring of Manu. It's saying that sentient beings' birth is not truly established because it dependently originates. Their birth is a dependent arising. It's not an origin, a singular origin. It's a dependent arising. So this is the point that's made here. Yet the karma that you possess does not disappear. The virtuous and non-virtuous give rise to their effects accordingly. So virtuous behavior gives rise to happiness. Non-virtuous behavior gives rise to suffering. So the logical approach is sound. So using correct signs, using the subject I is not truly established because it dependently originates. This word sound, the word zampo is very good. It's the logical approach is best almost, or the logical approach is very good. And then it says, though subtle and difficult to see. So it's only really a Buddha who truly has the direct valid cognition of the complete understanding of karma and its results. So that word is put there because it's really the Buddha who one must be a Buddha in order to understand these difficult points that are made, these subtle points that are made about karma and its results. Black actions give rise to suffering. White actions give rise to happiness. So again, as a translation note, it doesn't say in this text virtue, non-virtue. It just keeps talking about black and white karma, black and white karma. So when we look at the original, we don't have, it just says the black and white give rise to their effects accordingly in the Tibetan text. So there's the direct words aren't in the Tibetan, just as a note. It is within the scope of the conqueror. So it's only the conqueror who can understand karma and its results completely because he or she understands them through direct valid cognition. But using logic for us, the logical approach is best at this point for us, using logic. Dixon.
추 나와나진 대범 마루거레스 세제도 신내 지된 바르도 저와셔만 로레스 신내 지된 바른 로아이 세제 실리제범 매미장 바른 근데 신내 저와셔만 로게 세제 shele jeba mami jang song du daba zhuwa yo ma res daba zhuwa mami jang daba zhuwa mami jang
So all phenomena.
daba zhuwa mami jang dene shema zhuwa yo wa res dene shema zhuwa yo wa re shema le kabi lende tang nabi lende zu nga zhuwa res
Less so.
le na sheba meba manju te ka na jijin rebu meba shes jawa tsende tsa shumal mingu res te tabi reba le san du se tamba ina o de san lu de yabu res
Less so.
rebi chuju gun de zangwa te
Less so.
te chira chawa tongka yi jayu shu yi se tongka wa chawa she kabu res sanjik shu yi
Less so. So
yeah.
So all phenomena are like the moon reflected in water. So all phenomena are not truly established because they dependently originate. As the moon reflecting in water dependently originates, all phenomena dependently originates. Therefore, they are not truly established. And it says, it is not the case that living beings who die and go on to their next lives are offspring of Manu. So here what this is meaning is beings who go to their next lives are not truly established. The birth is not truly established. The going to the next life is not truly established. It dependently originates. And the experience of that next life is dependent upon the virtue, the black and white karmas, and what they give rise to. So the actual future life has experiences of happiness with virtue and suffering with non-virtue. It is not the case that there is a lack of dependent origination in relation to one's arisal or one's future life. And yet the karma that you possess does not disappear. The virtuous and non-virtue give rise to their effects accordingly. The logical approach is sound. So using logic is best. Logic is the best way to understand this, even though the complete understanding of that is really only the conqueror. The only one who completely understands that is the conqueror, is Buddha. But for us, using logic is best.
Wa dege toni le rebi chayu chu ten we janji be wa dege toni le rebi chayu chu ten ba res de kaji toni tu ke she ne le rel ma so wa de toni ko wa shin ju lu su ba res toni ko ngne cha ba ina toni she be lu dege ten de she lu chu she ten de she lu dege toni she lu chu she ba ju res.
So we find this connection between the mind that understands dependent origination and the mind that understands emptiness. So the mind that understands emptiness is the mind that understands dependent origination. The mind that understands dependent origination is the mind that understands emptiness. So we find this point now made by Jayan Sheba, and that is what comes from emptiness. What comes from emptiness? What comes from emptiness is the understanding of dependent origination, because it is emptiness. And what comes from the understanding of dependent origination is an enhancement of one's understanding of karma and its results. So that's what this section is dealing with, and this assistance that takes place between the mind that understands dependent origination and the mind that understands karma and its results. So now we're moved to 4.
Nisen kundu gusung la tuba shingi ngandu jujes tuma judeji nayi la mekeshi chungze shejang gusung bayan su nyoba ne ngandu gujeba kuna te ne jatsu shuba les jatsu shuba lui jaba jatsu ke sanje shuba injirwa lui dabos Shanju Samba Naji Chuji and Nanson Nandu Loba Tonga, Jiwa Yantaba Judo, Chuji with Kanshena, Data de Chetat Da Jetaran Chuji, Nisan and Dashin, Dujanto, 기유추 나라 소소도바데 셰송비셔로스 워드다 제바데 제바 워드게 가수그레다 다뜨게 워드 땡도 다 제바데게 네 텐디들 준디 텐디다 주진을 템베 텐디다 다질 템베 텐디니 과노 주진을 템베 텐디 줄리 제바라 텐지 제바 조와스 가지 첸레 제바 테마시 주진 제베 텐디 텐 마르바 아네 톰바 가지 텐조 마이미 총가 여보마 티지 톰바 마이 총가 여보테 다질 템베 텐디 강가 인제레 다질 템베 텐디 다 와데 우틀 산에 아부타 마이나 네 주진을 템베 텐디 산에 아부타 마이나 카빌렌데 다 나빌렌데 또 야브시오레스 카빌렌데 다 나빌렌데 또 야브시오레 다질 템베 텐디 산에 아부타 마이나 추노 데바 마루바 시오레스 네 추노 추에 데모 마루 텐디 임베제르 달칸 다질 템베 텐디 참모 멘도아 텐디 참모 주진을 템베 텐디 라바 와데 주진을 템베 텐디 산 마부타 바이나 카빌렌데 다 나빌렌데 투수 산 코용거레스 셰용거레스 카빌렌데 셰소나 너무 주봉 수진 가도제도 소마돈 디발 샤다제야 들제바이나 내손제야 고드카는 그레스 와데 고 안에 대나 텐디 레니 주던 레비제발라 내가 지지 예천 군도 구송라 또바시기 나도 주지사 텐디시 예천 군도 르nga 예송주고네 안에 디바 먹어사야다 거와사와 도술레 상로야부탄도 지게 안에 내송 고드카그레스 고드 주지사 토마 텐디지 나의 메시신스 토마 주진을 템베 텐디다 다질 템베 텐디 나수 나의 메시신 종제 시장 고송 방향수 조반나사 때 셰바이나야다네 르지 셰바다 나그셔바 디바 마마사바이나 워등에서 고카투 마고신을 그랬어 고제바 코나데 자수슈발레 루이자부 자수이저와 루이자부 자수 상제르슈 상제르 루이자부 자수레 송샤빈도 대인서 루이다보스다 상제르 로들 루이자부들 메바이저와 루이다보 샹주 셈바 나제 추지기 나누가루 로바동아 저와양다바 쥐도스 루이자보 안에 샹주 셈바 나제 추지기 나송나루 동요 곧쥐어그레스 쥐도 추지도 가르스나 추지부도 강시나 너다데 다제 따라 추지 다제다 추지 예선 다시 노냐도 기유추나라 소소도바데스 나마 가와추기 제보 안에 더와당 마당 살지야다 타바당 타제제보들 산당바이나 와드는 뭐좀 추주송 네 도지선 샤도데 제바이나 나루 고드가르 그레스 어떻게 되고 와레스
Lesso.
송바 이제바들어 지바
Then Jipa sen mingare. John Sheba.
이제바들에 다들 이제바데세 렌델라 사나 쉘루장지메 벤사 렌델라 사나 렌델 산타바이나 내지 시구요 상바지 산타바지 뱅마레스 어때 렌델 군에 시네 안는 그좀 우주진 가도 저도 송 디발 샤다지야 어떤 마지나 내송 고카투 마레스 고시옹레스 쉘루장지메 벤사 렌델 산타바이나
Lesso.
think kamarebe
Lesso.
렌델 산타바이나 쉘루장지메 벤사 당에 렌델 시구요 렌델 시구요 상루 여바서 팽마레스 문에 시구르스 문에 시네 뭐그 좋은 수지 것도 저도 도지상 거샤다 제바이나
So this next section is that one can't close the door to the lower realms unless there is a complete understanding of karma and its results. So if there is only a partial understanding, then one won't be able to close the door to the lower realms. It will actually open it. So thinking about karma and its results should be in a complete fashion, in its complete depth. So therefore, develop certain knowledge of dependent arising together with causality of the two kinds of karma, and examine your physical, verbal, and mental actions all day and all night. By this means you will put an end to miserable rebirths. However, if at the outset you are not versed in the classifications of cause and effect, understanding only a fragment of their depth, and having a lax attitude with your physical, verbal, and mental actions, then you are merely throwing open the door to the miserable realms. For as the questions of the Naga kings of the ocean states, Lord of Nagas, a single practice of the Bodhisattva correctly puts a stop to rebirth in the miserable realms. What is this single practice? It is the discernment of what is virtuous. You must think, am I being true? How am I spending the day and night? So one should analyze his or her behavior at all times. And the Bodhisattva is engaging in what is virtuous and abandoning that which is non-virtuous. So by engaging in the virtuous activities, the ethics which abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities, and so forth, one is able to achieve the state of a higher realm rebirth. One is able to achieve the state of liberation. One is able to achieve the state of complete Buddhahood. So here it says, develop certain knowledge of dependent arising. When we look at dependent arising, there are two types of dependent arising. Dependent arising that is causes and conditions, and this is the most coarse form of dependent arising. The dependent arising of that which is a collection, or the comings together or a collection. And as a note, all phenomena fit into that. Causes and conditions, we're referring to impermanence. All phenomena, even permanent, fits into the dependent origination that is a collection of parts coming together. So I apologize for that translator's note. I just wanted to make it clear. And I think there might even be a better term for the coming together. There might be a more technical term. I apologize that I don't have that. So there's the two types of dependent origination: causes and conditions coming together, and then the collection coming together. So the collection coming together is the subtle form of dependent origination. So it's together with the causality of the two kinds of karma, so virtuous and non-virtuous karma, and then you examine what you are doing with your body, speech, and mind in relation to those things. If one engages in that activity, then one will end the lower realm rebirth. So we find if one engages in the ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities and goes for refuge to the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then acknowledges one's downfalls, applies the four opponent powers to those negativities that he or she has engaged in, then one will be able to close the doors of the lower realms of cyclic existence. And then eventually be able to achieve liberation, and then eventually be able to achieve the complete state of Buddhahood. But it's by relying on those practices of refuge ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities and acknowledging one's downfalls and applying a practice such as the four opponent powers that allows one to achieve all the other forms of happiness. So all forms of happiness, whether they are the higher realms, liberation, or Buddhahood, are dependent upon virtuous activities. And that's why it says that the Bodhisattva is able to close the doors to the lower realms of rebirth with one single practice. And that single practice is engaging in virtue and spending the day and night checking one's body, speech, and mind in relation to virtue and non-virtue. So this is the point that's made here.
What then they wanted 대진 대번 저 돈은 추동고 추 대대 동선 추동거를
So if you see dependent origination, you see dende tuna tong.
대대 동선나 제부 중근 추 링의 추 제비 추도 동거로 아
So if you
대진 대번 저 돈은 추동고
So if you see dependent origination, then you see the dharma of the small scope, the dharma of the medium scope, and the dharma of the great scope. And one thing I forgot from before, all things are dependent arisal, therefore they are empty. So Rinpoche said that before. So by understanding dependent origination, you understand these three scopes.
What the 대진 대번 돈은 추동고 대신 씹어 동고我的去这不从去另一去这边去通通那只是了点呢，那上街也不空我嘛对吧
So if you see the dharma of the small, medium, and great scope, then you see the Buddha. If you see dependent origination, you see the three scopes of dharma. If you see the three scopes of dharma, then you see the Buddha.
我等的，他最近了等的，得了等的我的。每个地方我出现，干那个来的都是嫌我什么的啊？最近来的，等的来的呢，隔壁来的，那边来的是同我说啊，隔壁来的，那边来的，等起来我从那去同我说，我都是什么的呗。
So when you look at the dependent origination of karma and its results, we would find categorically that this dependent origination, which deals with white and black karma and its results, would be the causes and conditions. The arisal of causes and conditions.
네 준비 된들라 준비 된들라 되네 네 주제라 되면 된들라 되네 군주 최도 통으로서 더 말봐 안에 더를 맞더래
Sure.
어제 다들 어디 다들 되면 된들라 되네 어디 대범하고 시험원도 대단 대봐 요송 어디서 통으로 잡으소 Dama, Dama, Ni Tongs, Legend of Tona, Chu Tongs, Chu. Kundu Chu, Dana Chu Tongs, Dama.
So those who see dependent origination see the Dharma. So when we look at phenomena or dharmas, sometimes I use these words interchangeably. So if you look at phenomena or dharmas, we have two categories. We have conventional reality and then ultimate reality. So those who see dependent origination see the dharma, see the conventional, see the ultimate reality. So this is what, in this case, the dharma is referring to. So when we look at how one is able to achieve the state of Buddhahood, it's necessary to rely upon method and wisdom. So by seeing and understanding dependent origination, one is gathering that wisdom that is necessary to become the cause of the result, which is complete Buddhahood. Jason.
What the danger about Tendi Leni Judan Jeba Leni Judan Deba Jebala, never Jiji Tento, Gusula Tuba Shiki, Nandu Gujuza. Tendi said that legend generating of a mother. That Judan Deba to Sukno Takaso Chishegu, Chiji Juiseni, Chiji Juiseni, Chijan Debiseni Marba, Chiji Juiseni. Judan de Bungos to Gires. Juin and Mobi Michel de Wimcha. Jedan Judan de Wim to Gires. The Judan, the Devosan Givaris. Nai Judan, ngain debusana gewaren what to shegu kuzi logo ji ju senji ane jijan debi senji mar ben debi senji ji ju senji jula ina ngoju to juju nyele dan la ji ji what no mo ja gu do de to shegu do kuzo.
So when we look at cause and effect, we can break them down into various categories. So the definition of cause, and I'm going to look all this up after and come back with it. The definition of a cause is that which gives rise, and the definition of a result is that which is arisen, or accomplished. And there are various different kinds of causes and results. So there's direct cause, indirect cause, compatible cause, or what's it called? So compatible cause. So there are various types of cause and effect. So when we look at the terms cause and effect, we state that cause and effect are mutually inclusive, but the cause of this and the effect of this are mutually exclusive. The cause of me and the effect of me are mutually exclusive. So when we look at cause and effect, we state that cause and effect are mutually inclusive, but as soon as we add the cause of this and the effect of this or that, then they become mutually exclusive. So here it says, so Rinpoche reread this, therefore develop certain knowledge of dependent arising together with the causality of the two kinds of karma. Examine your physical, verbal, and mental actions all day and night. By this means you will put an end to the miserable realms.
Tende leni judan debujebala nyabachis leni kabile de nabile de marba.
So here the two kinds of karma are referring to black and white karma. So the causality of the two kinds of karma, the black karma and white karma.
Tamal dabin debo jutung debo ane penjigile dojigile ngebile mangebile mabusonso.
So when we look at this, there's a lot that one needs to know when we look at the causality of the two kinds of karma, because then we have to start to look at the fruitional results, causally concordant results, environmental results, throwing karma, completing karma, karma that you've done, karma that you've not done, etc. So there are many different points that are within that that are needed in order to understand karma and its results, the two kinds of karma.
What do Santana then what the Nabil and the Niebo, Nokijubu Sujin Foya, Kadu Chetu Sumaduna, Debal Shadanjea, John Duto to say some of it, to Zinan, Nandu good carnivals.
So we then apply an antidote to our non-virtuous activities. We engage in an ethic which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities. And then if we can't abandon some sort of non-virtue, we acknowledge that downfall and apply a 4 opponent powers to it. And by doing so, we will put an end to the miserable realms of cyclic existence. So by this means, by engaging in the ethics, by abandoning the non-virtue, by acknowledging downfalls, you will put an end to the miserable realms.
Good Jews, Thomas Jundeji, Nayela Makishis, Jundeji Nayela Makison, Judan Debutu Kashiwa, Jews Seni Gadare, Debu Seni Gadares, Gigi Jews Seni, Jijan Debi Seni, Jula in a Mojuta Juju, Nielet and Hedgishin, what the name of Yaya Marbata, Jula ina Mojuta Juju, Nielet and Hedgishin, Tapananga Dil Shinkal data or day. Data by in a Gunkal water, data Jahade, Yakag and Dig Juju Marba Juju. Shinkal to Sayag and data, Piching Moju Marba Moju. Kundebu Katul Jogori Jumoroda. Moju Juju.
That's it.
Yelet and Hedgishin. Yeles and data, Yaja Dig Yelero, Yelemarba. Yele. Hedgishin and the Shinkatu Marba. Shinkatu dig Hedgishin. Did the digging Lemarba.
Yerland Yanders, I made Jason, Yerland Jew.
Nilen did down the Niajan Day Udo, the Nilerota.
So when we look at causes and results, we have many different classifications. We have direct causes. For instance, if we're planting something into a field, putting the seed into the field, that's the direct cause for the sprout, for the arisal. And then we have indirect causes, and then we have cooperating conditions that are causes, such as the field itself becomes a cooperating condition for that arisal, and the arisal of a like cause, or like something like this, like cause, meaning that from rice arises rice, not something else. So if you plant a rice seed, you get a rice. So it's almost like a concordant, causally concordant, but that's not I don't think, the right word. So we have all of these different points that are made. So for instance, if we want to plant a seed and have a sprout, we have to do that in the summer. We can't do that in the winter. So here we find some conditions and so forth that are necessary in order for there to be an arisal. So this is what is meant by cause and effect. And we have to know, what does cause mean? What does result mean? What is an arisal? What is that which is arisen? And so forth. And I can bring next week, because it's in the Dudra, and we have it all translated, all the definitions and so forth of cause, effect, and all the divisions of cause and effect. So if anybody's interested in that. So the cooperative condition is the field. And the guy or the person planting the seeds is a cooperative condition.
So when
we look at the birth of a child, what would we say is the direct cause? The intermediate state would be the direct cause. The parents are the cooperative conditions. So when we think about these things, then we're thinking about cause and effect. So by thinking of Judre la dene dende, Gaisobre. So this is a dependent arisal that is from causes and conditions when we're looking at it in this way. So we find a very clear Rinpoche saying understanding of these things in the Dudra, the logic primer, the collected topics, it's called a lot. It's probably the best way to translate it, the collected topics. And we find, what is the definition of cause? What is the definition of a result? How many divisions of cause are there? How many divisions of result are there? So we find all of this presented in the collected topics, or the logic primer. Okay. So we're going to end here, and we will do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Shira Selbudu, Tujirimchi, Gushabi Denonon, Shira Gasum. Sharon Sheda Shindu, Gutsodu, Sharon Mena, Natsu Hako Mari. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandok, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tu Rinpoche Guti Shapi Denona, Lamrim Chenmo Kanga Chirama.